The day the message arrived, it changed everything. For centuries, humans had lived quietly among the stars, growing, exploring, building, and learning. They had colonized new planets, created advanced technologies, and survived challenges that would have destroyed lesser species. But the galaxy beyond their worlds had largely ignored them. Other civilizations saw humans as curious, adaptable, maybe even clever, but never as a serious force. That perception was about to be shattered. The message from the Galactic Council was clear and formal. It arrived not as a casual communication, but as an official summons, one that carried the weight of centuries of authority. Every word was measured, every sentence carefully constructed. Humans, it said, you are required to pay tribute to the Council. Failure to comply will be regarded as defiance, and defiance carries consequences. Respond within the standard. Galactic cycle. The human colonies received the message almost simultaneously. On Earth, in the bustling cities and quiet research centers, people paused as the broadcast went live across every screen and channel. Scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens alike watched the Council's seal appear, the symbol of a power that had always seemed distant, almost untouchable. Children in classrooms stared in fascination. Elders in their homes frowned with concern, and leaders quickly gathered to discuss what it meant. At first, many felt fear. The Council was a coalition of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Their fleets could crush planets, their diplomats could sway entire systems, and their punishments had long been known to be absolute. For any species, receiving a demand like this would have been terrifying. Some humans, especially those who had lived on outer colonies far from Earth, feared that this was the start of an invasion, or that they would be forced to surrender everything they had built. But humans had never been a species that bowed easily to fear. From the earliest days on Earth, they had faced countless threats, famine, disease, war, natural disasters, and had always adapted. That same instinct to survive, to analyze, and to respond strategically now came to the forefront. Instead of panic, leaders called for councils. Scientists and engineers joined politicians and military experts. Everyone who could contribute had a voice. The first meetings were intense. Large chambers on Earth and in orbital command centers filled with discussions that lasted for hours. Some argued for compliance. The Council has power beyond our understanding, one voice would say. It's safer to pay tribute, keep peace, and continue our work. Others argued for negotiation. If we offer a compromise, we might be able to maintain our independence without risking war. Another countered, but a third group had a different perspective entirely. They reminded everyone of humanity's history, of the countless times humans had turned weakness into strength. They pointed out that the Council had underestimated them for generations. The humans had quietly developed technologies and strategies that no other species expected. We are not just another colony or primitive species, this group said. We have grown in ways they cannot imagine. This is our chance to show them exactly who we are. The debates were heated, but productive. Humans do not make decisions lightly, but once they decide, they commit fully. They considered the Council's possible reactions to every scenario, simulated outcomes, and examined their own strengths and vulnerabilities. For days, discussions continued. Scientists calculated probabilities, strategists ran simulations, and diplomats reviewed every past interaction with the Council. Each human colony, while separated by light years, shared its findings in real time, creating a network of knowledge and insight that no single species in the galaxy could match. Meanwhile, ordinary people watched and waited. In city streets, in homes, in orbital stations, humans speculated about what the Council might demand. News channels and public forums were filled with discussion, not panic. Children imagined the Council as strange alien figures with long robes and glowing symbols. Adults debated quietly about what tribute could mean. Would they demand resources, technology, or even human lives? Yet, even in these moments of fear, there was a growing sense of pride. Humanity had survived countless trials before, and now, for the first time, the galaxy was testing them as a species. Then came the decision. Humans would not bow, and they would not negotiate from a place of fear. Instead, they would respond with clarity and strength, showing the Council that they were a force to be reckoned with. But the response would not be aggressive. It would be deliberate, intelligent, and unmistakable. It would not provoke recklessness, but it would force every species, including the Council, to recognize that humans were no longer just another presence in the galaxy. They were equals, perhaps even something greater. As the final messages were prepared, humans focused on precision. Every word, every image, every piece of data included in the reply was chosen to demonstrate not only their refusal to pay tribute, but also their capabilities. They wanted the Council to understand that this was not a rebellion born of arrogance, but a declaration born of awareness, competence, and unity. They would not be underestimated again. In orbital command centers, engineers adjusted communication arrays to send the reply across light years of space, ensuring it reached every Council chamber at exactly the right moment. Scientists monitored energy readings, military analysts reviewed defenses, and diplomats crafted the wording with care. Even the phrasing of the reply mattered. It had to convey respect, firmness, and intelligence, all at once. As the transmission was sent, there was a palpable sense of history being made. Humans watched the message leave their systems, knowing it would take days to reach the Council. Yet they felt no fear. There was confidence in their preparation, in their unity, and in their abilities. They were not responding out of arrogance or defiance alone. They were responding as a species that had earned the right to stand tall. For the first time, humans understood the true meaning of their place in the galaxy. They were not just survivors, explorers, or inventors. They were a species that could alter the balance of power simply by refusing to be controlled. The Council may have summoned them as subjects, but humans were ready to show that they were something far more significant. Something that no one, not even the most powerful beings in the galaxy, could ignore. As the message traveled through the void of space, it carried with it the hopes, fears, and pride of every human alive. It was more than a reply. It was a statement of identity, a declaration that humanity had arrived, fully aware of its potential, ready to claim its place, and unwilling to compromise its freedom for anything. The days that followed were tense. Humans waited, prepared, and watched the stars, knowing that the galaxy's response would shape the future. But for the first time in their history, humans were not reacting. They had acted. They had taken control of their destiny. And somewhere, across the vast expanse of space, the Council would soon realize that the species they had underestimated was not only awake, but fully aware of its own power. And so began the chapter of humanity that would shatter expectations, rewrite rules, and change the galaxy forever. After the Council's demand arrived, humanity faced a moment unlike any other in its history. It was one thing to survive on Earth, to explore neighboring planets, and to develop advanced technology in secret. It was quite another to have the most powerful assembly in the galaxy point directly at you and demand obedience. Across human colonies, people felt the weight of this challenge. Some felt fear, others disbelief, but no one ignored it. Every human understood that this was a turning point. How they responded now could shape the future of their species for centuries. From the heart of Earth to distant colonies orbiting alien stars, leaders called for gatherings. Not just politicians or military commanders, but scientists, engineers, strategists, and even ordinary citizens with specialized skills joined in. Humanity had always valued ideas from every corner, believing that solutions often came from unexpected minds. So these councils were inclusive, diverse, and intense. They were debates, discussions, and strategy sessions, all rolled into one, lasting hours, sometimes days, without pause. The first challenge was to understand the demand itself. Pay tribute seemed simple on the surface, but the implications were enormous. Tribute could mean giving away resources, technology, or even lives. It could mean acknowledging the council's superiority and submitting to their authority, changing the way humans saw themselves forever. Some voices in the council suggested cautious compliance. We could send a small token, they argued, something symbolic, just to keep them satisfied. Then we can plan for the future. But others were vehemently opposed. If we give in even a little, we will be seen as weak, they warned. The galaxy will assume humans are easy to control. That will endanger us for generations. As discussions continued, it became clear that humanity's strength lay in its unity and adaptability. Even species that seemed powerful individually could crumble when divided, but humans had a history of finding strength through collaboration, through the mixing of ideas and perspectives. The council realized that any response could not be impulsive or driven by fear. They needed a plan that reflected both caution and confidence, one that would signal humanity's capabilities without triggering unnecessary hostility. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to assess their resources and technology. They reviewed their fleets, communication systems, defense mechanisms, and even experimental weapons that had been kept secret for decades. Every possibility was explored. Could humans defend themselves if the council decided to act immediately? Could they negotiate from a position of power rather than submission? Could their technological advancements be presented in a way that would force respect instead of fear? These questions were not theoretical. They were essential for survival. Meanwhile, diplomats and political leaders studied the council itself. They researched its members, its history, and its patterns of behavior. Every species in the council had its strengths, weaknesses, and predictable tendencies. Humans had always been observers, learning from others' successes and mistakes, and now that skill became vital. They identified which species might push for aggressive measures, which might seek compromise, and which could be persuaded by logic and evidence. Strategy became a science in itself. The discussions were intense, but humans also understood the importance of morale. Across colonies, ordinary citizens followed the progress closely. News channels broadcasted updates about human deliberations, and though much was kept confidential, people could sense the determination and focus of their leaders. Children drew images of humans standing tall in front of alien figures. Adults debated quietly in homes, workplaces, and public forums. For the first time, people felt that humanity was not just surviving, they were about to prove themselves to the galaxy. One of the most important aspects of the deliberation was timing. Humans knew that any response had to be calculated, not rushed. Too fast, and it might seem reckless. Too slow, and it could show hesitation or fear. They used simulations to predict the council's reaction to various approaches to outright defiance. Every scenario was considered, and every contingency planned. This level of foresight was uniquely human, a combination of intelligence, creativity, and the ability to anticipate reactions in ways no other species could. As the days passed, a plan began to emerge. It was bold, clear, and unmistakable. Humans would not pay tribute, they would not grovel or offer excuses. But they also would not act with aggression unless necessary. Instead, their response would demonstrate their intelligence, strength, and unity. It would make the council realize that humans were not a species to be commanded, they were a species to be reckoned with. Every word of the reply, every image, and every data set would be carefully chosen. It would not be a threat, but it would be impossible to ignore. During these preparations, human communities experienced a mix of tension and pride. Scientists ran late-night simulations of energy flows. Engineers upgraded communications arrays, and strategists analyzed battle scenarios that might never come to pass. Ordinary citizens contributed by producing research, reviewing archives, and even helping to craft the wording of the response. Humanity had always been strongest when working together, and now that strength was on full display. The preparation itself became a source of inspiration, proving to everyone that humans were capable, adaptable, and united in purpose. Some moments of tension were inevitable. A few argued for more cautious approaches, worrying that the Council might misinterpret humanity's confidence as arrogance. Others pushed for maximum disclosure of human capabilities, believing that transparency would command respect. Debates sometimes became heated, but the human ability to listen, adapt, and find common ground always prevailed. By the time the plan was finalized, it reflected a rare balance: firmness without hostility, intelligence without arrogance, and unity without blind conformity. Then came the moment of decision. Humans gathered in command centers, in cities, and on colonies far from Earth to witness the transmission of their response. The message was not long, but it carried weight. It explained humanity's refusal to pay tribute, detailed key technological achievements, and demonstrated strategic capabilities. The transmission was precise, calm, and clear. It conveyed confidence and unity without aggression, showing the Council that humans had not arrived by chance. They had arrived through determination, intelligence, and resilience. When the message finally left human systems, there was a mix of tension and relief. Across the galaxy, the transmission began its journey, traveling faster than any observer could watch, heading straight for the Council. Humans did not know exactly how the Council would react, but there was no fear, only anticipation. For the first time, humanity had moved from reaction to action. They had seized control of their destiny and announced to the galaxy that they would no longer be underestimated or ignored. As humans watched the stars, waiting for a response, they reflected on what had brought them to this moment. Generations of survival, exploration, innovation, and learning had prepared them for this challenge. Every mistake, every success, every triumph and failure had led to a species capable of standing tall against the most powerful assembly in the galaxy. They were no longer just a species among many. They were a species that had earned its place, and they intended to claim it fully. The galaxy would soon learn something important. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and determined. They did not follow the expected path. They did not bow to fear, and they did not surrender their autonomy. They acted with foresight, unity, and intelligence, qualities that the Council had long underestimated. Humanity's reply would change perceptions forever, not through threats or violence, but through sheer presence, competence, and audacity. And so, humanity waited. They waited not out of fear, but with the quiet confidence of a species that knew its own strength. They had decided, they had acted, and now the galaxy would respond. Whether the Council realized it immediately or not, a turning point had arrived. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question. It was a statement. The weeks that followed were tense, filled with anticipation and speculation. Humans watched the stars, monitored communications, and maintained readiness for any reaction. Yet, unlike other species that might have panicked or acted rashly, humans remained focused, disciplined, and united. Theirs was not an impulsive pride, but a measured, steady confidence. They understood that real power was not just in weaponry or numbers, but in intelligence, foresight, and unity. By the end of this period, it was clear to every human that something remarkable had occurred. The species that had long been underestimated had acted decisively, demonstrating qualities that could not be ignored. The Council, no matter how powerful, had been forced to see humans in a new light. And in this realization, humanity found not only satisfaction, but also the beginning of a new era, one where they would be recognized as equals, and perhaps even as leaders in the unfolding story of the galaxy. The day finally came when humanity's reply would leave their systems and travel across the galaxy. It was a moment that had been anticipated for weeks, debated for months, and prepared for with meticulous precision. Across human colonies, in orbital command centers, on Earth, and on distant frontier worlds, people paused to witness history. This was not just a response to a demand. It was a statement of identity, capability, and resolve. In the command center orbiting Earth, the central hub for transmitting the message, hundreds of humans worked in perfect synchronization. Engineers monitored communication arrays, making sure the signals would travel uninterrupted across thousands of light years. Scientists double-checked the data, ensuring every figure, every schematic, and every demonstration of technology was accurate. Strategists coordinated with orbital fleets to make sure defensive systems were ready in case of an unexpected reaction. Diplomats carefully reviewed the wording of the message again and again, adjusting tone and emphasis to be firm but non-hostile. Every detail mattered. Humans watched as the countdown reached its final seconds. On every planet, every colony, people gathered around screens, holding their breath. Children, fascinated by the strange symbols and glowing lights of the command center, asked questions, and elders offered quiet encouragement. The message was about to go where no human message had gone before, straight to the council that had once seemed untouchable. And then it was sent. The transmission moved at faster than light speed, a beam of data, images, and words cutting across the void of space. The content was concise, yet overwhelming. Humanity had refused to pay tribute, making it absolutely clear that they would not bow to external authority. But the refusal alone was not enough. A message included detailed evidence of human achievements, orbital fleets capable of defending entire systems, energy sources that could power whole planets, advanced weapons that were precise, not destructive, and technologies that other species had considered impossible. Images of human engineering projects, laboratories, spaceports, and ships filled the transmission. Every frame was carefully selected to demonstrate not just power, but ingenuity. Diagrams showed the organization of fleets and defensive structures, along with strategies for both defense and coordination. But perhaps the most important part was the tone. Humans had made it clear that they were not threatening war, only asserting their sovereignty. The message carried confidence, clarity, and the unmistakable sense that this was a species that would not be underestimated again. Across the colonies, the response was electric. Humans watched as the message left their systems, and a wave of pride swept through every community. Engineers smiled, strategists exchanged knowing nods, and ordinary citizens celebrated quietly, understanding that humanity had taken control of its destiny. For the first time, humans were not merely reacting to the galaxy, they were acting. And their action was bold, precise, and unforgettable. As the transmission reached the first relay points beyond human-controlled space, the reactions began. Other species that intercepted the message were stunned. Some assumed it was a bluff, perhaps an exaggeration designed to intimidate. But as more of the data and images came through, it became impossible to dismiss. Fleet capabilities, energy calculations, and technological schematics were undeniable. Humans were not merely claiming strength, they were proving it in ways that no species had anticipated. The Council itself received the message in a grand chamber that had long been the center of power in the galaxy. Representatives of countless Species, from the smallest colonies to massive planetary governments, gathered to watch the transmission. At first, there was confusion. Some envoys leaned forward, squinting at the screens, trying to understand if the humans were serious. Was this defiance a joke? An error? Some of the older species murmured, "We underestimated them. We really underestimated them." As the transmission continued, silence fell. The images, the data, and the tone of humanity's reply left no room for doubt. Humans had prepared carefully, anticipating questions and challenges, and their message demonstrated not only refusal, but competence, strategy, and unity. The Council, which had expected obedience, was confronted with something entirely different. A species that could not be commanded, a species that had grown in secrecy, and a species that was fully capable of defending itself against any force. In the galaxy dot across the galaxy, reactions varied. Some species were awed, seeing humans as equals or perhaps even superiors in strategic thinking and technological development. Others were fearful, realizing that prior assumptions about human weakness were entirely wrong. A few of the more aggressive factions began to consider their options, questioning whether they should negotiate, ally, or prepare for conflict. Humans had forced every species to reconsider their assumptions, and the ripple effect was immediate. Back on Earth and human colonies, people continued to watch and wait. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mix of pride and anticipation. Humans had acted decisively, but they had no control over how the galaxy would respond. Yet even in this uncertainty, there was confidence. For the first time, humans had spoken not from fear or desperation, but from a place of intelligence and unity. They had proven that they were capable of standing alone, and they had done so without aggression, without panic, and without submission. The significance of the moment was not lost on humans. Across the colonies, children asked questions about the Council and the species beyond the stars. Teachers and mentors explained in simple terms what had just happened. Humanity had been underestimated. They had prepared, and they had responded in a way that no other species could have imagined. People began to understand that history was being written, not by chance, but by their own actions. Even ordinary citizens felt the impact. Farmers, miners, and engineers went about their work with a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that humanity's position in the galaxy had changed overnight. What had once seemed distant and abstract to the Council, the galaxy, the stars, now felt tangible and immediate. Humans were no longer just participants in a vast universe. They were players who had announced their arrival with authority and clarity. The message itself became a topic of discussion in every corner of human space. Analysts studied the data, comparing it to known technologies and strategies. Scholars debated the implications of human ingenuity and adaptability. Children created drawings, imagining humans standing boldly before alien species. Ordinary families talked about the future, imagining what new opportunities might come now that humans had proven their independence. At the Council, the implications were far more serious. Some envoys began to question their own species' assumptions and actions. Could they have overlooked a species that was capable, intelligent, and united? Could their own strategies for dominance and control be outdated? These questions sparked debates, arguments, and even panic in some quarters. For centuries, the Council had assumed that humans were compliant, limited, and predictable. That assumption was gone, replaced by something entirely new, uncertainty, and that uncertainty was dangerous. For the first time, the Council could not predict humanity's next move. Humans had shown that they were capable of independent thought, decisive action, and strategic intelligence. They had demonstrated technological capabilities that rivaled or exceeded the expectations of many advanced species. They had refused tribute without aggression, showing that their confidence was rooted in competence, not arrogance. Back in human colonies, people prepared for the consequences. Although the response had been peaceful, they knew that other species, including the Council, might test their strength. Defense systems were upgraded, fleets were repositioned, and research into advanced technologies continued at an accelerated pace. Humanity had sent its message, but the story was not over. The galaxy would respond, and humans were ready to meet that response with the same intelligence, unity, and determination that had carried them this far as the light years stretched. Between the human colonies and the council chambers, a quiet sense of pride settled over humanity. They had acted decisively, proving that a species long underestimated could stand tall, act strategically, and assert its independence. They had sent more than a message. They had sent a statement that would echo across the galaxy. The reaction would not be immediate everywhere, but the ripple had begun. Other species would talk, speculate, and reconsider their positions. Allies and rivals alike would reassess humanity's place in the galactic order. The Council itself, the very body that had once commanded obedience, had been confronted with the reality that humans were not to be treated lightly. And in every human heart, there was understanding. The galaxy would never see them the same way again. They had stepped out of the shadows of assumption and expectation, and in doing so, they had made history. Their message was simple, clear, and unforgettable. Humans were no longer a species to be underestimated. They were a species that had arrived fully aware of their capabilities and ready to claim their place among the stars. This was humanity's moment, not of war, not of conquest, but of assertion. They had acted with intelligence, courage, and unity. And somewhere, across countless systems and stars, the Council and the galaxy would soon realize that underestimating humans had been. The moment the message reached the Galactic Council, silence fell over the chambers. For centuries, no species had dared to defy the Council openly. Tributes had been paid, submissions accepted, and obedience expected. Yet here was humanity, a species that had long been underestimated, sending not only a refusal, but detailed evidence of its technological and strategic strength. The impact was immediate, profound, and unmistakable. Council members stared at the screens in disbelief. The data, diagrams, and images were undeniable. Humans had not only refused tribute, they had revealed capabilities that rivaled or exceeded what the Council had assumed were the galaxy's most advanced technologies. Orbital fleets, energy networks, defense strategies, and communication. Systems were displayed with precision, proving that humans were neither primitive nor weak. Every envoy leaned forward, whispering, murmuring, and speculating in shock. Some envoys attempted to downplay it at first. "This must be exaggeration," one said. "Surely they cannot possess such fleets or weapons." But as the transmission continued, the evidence became too clear to dismiss. Scientists and analysts within the Council's chambers began recalculating their estimates, checking every detail against known galactic data. Each confirmation only deepened the sense of alarm. Humans had grown, not quietly, but in ways no other species had expected. Panic began to ripple through the Council. Some factions reacted with disbelief, some with fear, and some with anger. Species that had always considered humans harmless suddenly realized that they had misjudged the situation entirely. "We underestimated them," a senior delegate admitted quietly, voice trembling. "They are not what we thought. They are something far more dangerous and intelligent than any of us realized." As the shockwave spread, smaller member species began questioning their own assumptions and alliances. Some wondered if they had been too complacent, relying on the Council's authority to protect them. Others feared retaliation if humans were challenged. The Council, which had long maintained control through intimidation and collective authority, suddenly found itself facing doubt, uncertainty, and chaos. Their centuries of assumed dominance had been shaken by a single transmission. The debates in the chambers grew louder and more intense. Some species called for an immediate show of force to remind humans of the Council's authority. "We must strike before they grow bolder," one voice insisted. Others argued for negotiation, pointing out that humans had not acted aggressively, only strategically. "We cannot respond with threats or war," another countered. "They have shown intelligence, foresight, and unity. Any rash action could provoke exactly what we fear." Humans, meanwhile, observed these reactions through careful monitoring of the Council's communications. They had anticipated a variety of responses, from intimidation to negotiation, but the level of chaos was more profound than even their simulations had predicted. Yet this was exactly the position humans wanted to create: uncertainty. By showing both capability and restraint, humans had forced every species in the galaxy to reconsider what they knew, what they assumed, and what they feared. The ripple effects went beyond the Council itself. Across allied systems, colonies, and trade networks, species began reassessing their relationships with humans. Some envoys quietly transmitted requests for information, seeking clarity about what humanity was capable of and what their intentions truly were. Traders and diplomats scrambled to update their strategies, realizing that humans could no longer be treated as predictable partners. In the span of hours, humanity had shifted the balance of power, not with aggression, but with intelligence and audacity. Even within human-controlled space, the citizens felt the weight of what had been accomplished. Across planets and orbital stations, people discussed the Council's likely reactions and debated what might come next. Scientists continued analyzing their own technologies, ensuring that any unforeseen challenge could be met. Military strategists reviewed contingency plans, updating defensive and tactical protocols. And diplomats remained vigilant, ready to respond if the Council or other species attempted to initiate contact or negotiation. One of the most remarkable aspects of this period was the unity it inspired among humans. Across colonies separated by light years, people shared a sense of purpose and pride. They understood that they had done something unprecedented. Humanity had not simply refused tribute, they had forced an entire galaxy to recognize them as a serious, capable, and independent species. And they had done it without aggression, without fear, and without arrogance. As the Council struggled to regain composure, individual species began reaching out privately, either to seek alliances with humans or to negotiate cautiously. Some envoys attempted to flatter and appease, offering minor concessions in exchange for insight into human technology and strategy. Others began discreetly studying the human colonies, trying to gauge whether they were truly as capable as the transmission had shown. Every species, in some way, had been forced to reassess its assumptions and strategies. The chaos within these council chambers reached its peak when a senior delegate proposed an emergency vote to determine the Council's response. It was a dramatic and unprecedented moment. Never before had the Council faced a species that acted with such intelligence, confidence, and restraint. Voices shouted, arguments clashed, and alliances shifted. Species that had once considered humans insignificant now realized that any decision could have far-reaching consequences. A single mistake, a rash action, or a misjudgment could provoke conflict with a species capable of defending itself across multiple systems. For humans, observing this from afar was both revealing and reassuring. They had prepared for retaliation, of course, but the real power lay in perception. By acting decisively, demonstrating capability, and maintaining calm, humans had created a galaxy-wide dilemma. The Council could no longer assume compliance, and other species had no choice but to reconsider their positions. Humans had effectively rewritten the rules, establishing themselves as equals rather than subjects. While some species panicked, or debated, others began quietly admiring humanity's approach. The combination of intelligence, strategy, and foresight was unlike anything most species had encountered. Humans had proven that strength did not always come from weapons alone. Planning, unity, and calculated restraint could shift entire systems of power. Slowly, whispers began to spread. Perhaps humans were not only equal to the most advanced species in the galaxy, but perhaps they were leaders in their own right, capable of shaping the future in ways no one had imagined. The shockwaves continued to spread outward. News of the Council's chaos reached allied and neutral species alike. Across distant colonies, scholars and observers debated the implications. Traders and diplomats scrambled to adjust their strategies. Military leaders reassessed potential threats, realizing that humans had demonstrated a level of coordination and capability previously unseen. Every corner of the galaxy felt the effect of humanity's single decisive action, even within human-controlled space. People remained vigilant. The citizens understood that the galaxy was uncertain, and uncertainty could be dangerous. But they also felt confidence. They had acted with intelligence, foresight, and unity. They had shown that humanity was capable of standing independently, and they had done so without provoking unnecessary conflict. They had not only defended their sovereignty, they had established respect. By the time the Council finally began to convene more organized discussions, the impact was clear. Humans were no longer underestimated. The galaxy had been forced to recognize them as a species capable of independent thought, strategic action, and technological sophistication. The Council's authority remained, but its confidence had been shaken. Every species now knew that humans could not be ignored, dismissed, or commanded without consequence. And in this new reality, humans prepared for the next chapter. They would continue to observe the galaxy, respond to challenges thoughtfully, and act decisively when needed. Their message had created shockwaves, disrupted assumptions, and forced respect. But it had also set expectations. Humans had arrived as a capable, united, and intelligent species, and the galaxy would need to adjust to that reality. Across countless systems, the story of humanity's reply spread. Even species that had no direct contact with humans learned of the events through trade networks, diplomatic channels, and intercepted communications. The transmission became a symbol of human capability and independence. For the first time, the galaxy recognized that humanity was not just another species among many. It was a force capable of shaping the balance of power. And so, the galaxy waited. The Council worked to regain its footing. Smaller species recalculated their positions, and humans remained vigilant, proud, and prepared. The shockwaves of that single message would be felt for years, decades, and perhaps centuries to come. Humans had not only refused tribute, they had shattered expectations, disrupted centuries of assumptions, and established a new era in which they would be recognized as equals, if not something greater, in the unfolding story of the galaxy. Humanity's place had been solidified, not by conquest, not by aggression, but by intelligence, foresight, and unity. The Council had been forced to see them in a new light, and the galaxy would never again underestimate the span. The ripples of humanity's message continued to spread across the galaxy, and its impact was far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The Council, once confident in its absolute authority, now faced a reality it had never imagined. Species it had long considered subordinate had refused tribute, demonstrated unmatched strategic thinking, and revealed technologies that were previously unknown to the rest of the galaxy. Shock quickly gave way to cautious reassessment, and every species began to reconsider its position in this new order. For many smaller species, the revelation was both alarming and enlightening. They had relied on the Council's authority to maintain a sense of security, believing that the hierarchy of power was absolute. Yet humanity had exposed the fragility of those assumptions. Discussions erupted in forums, meeting halls, and trade networks. "We may have misjudged humans entirely," one diplomat said. "They are not just another species we cannot ignore them." Others quietly recalculated their alliances, weighing whether it was safer to align with humanity rather than risk their ire. The council itself struggled to restore order. It was one thing to face human defiance, but it was another to manage the shock and uncertainty across hundreds of species. Debates became longer, arguments sharper, and votes more contentious. Some factions argued for immediate punitive action, believing that letting humanity remain unchecked could encourage rebellion in other systems. Others, more cautious, pointed out that humans had shown no aggression. They had only acted strategically and decisively. Any rash action might provoke a war that could engulf entire sectors. Humans, meanwhile, observed these shifts carefully. They did not need to intervene or react hastily. Their strategy had already set the galaxy off balance, and now patience became their most valuable tool. Across Earth and the colonies, scientists, strategists, and leaders monitored the galaxy's response in real time, noting the movements of fleets, the diplomatic exchanges, and the whispers that carried across light years. Every action, hesitation, and recalibration by other species was analyzed and prepared for. Humanity was ready, not because they wanted war, but because they understood the importance of being prepared for any scenario. Trade networks began to adjust almost immediately. Merchants and traders, who had once assumed that humans could be easily influenced or intimidated, now approached cautiously. Some sought contact with human systems, offering goods, information, or assistance in exchange for cooperation. Others waited, uncertain of how humans would respond to these overtures. The galaxy had always been interconnected, but now it was more strategic than ever. Humanity's presence had changed the calculus for every species, not through force, but through intelligence and perception. Even military leaders across various species began reassessing strategies. Fleets that had once patrolled sectors with ease now considered human capabilities in every calculation. War simulations were updated, contingencies revised, and alliances reconsidered. The humans had not displayed hostility, yet their demonstration of readiness and capability had altered the perception of what was possible. Every species realized that humanity could no longer be underestimated. Within human space, the sense of achievement was tempered by vigilance. Citizens understood that the galaxy was watching, and reactions could range from cautious diplomacy to attempts at provocation. Defense systems were upgraded, fleets were positioned strategically, and scientific research accelerated. Humans knew that showing restraint had gained respect, but preparedness would ensure survival if any species tested them. They had forced recognition without firing a single shot, a feat that inspired both pride and caution. Diplomacy took on a new level of complexity. Envoys from various species began reaching out to human leaders, some offering alliances, others proposing trade, and a few seeking guidance. The humans handled these exchanges carefully, balancing honesty, strategic advantage, and caution. They did not seek to dominate or manipulate, but they also did not reveal everything. Humanity had proven that subtlety, foresight, and patience were just as powerful as fleets or weapons. Even within the Council, the longer-term implications became apparent. Systems that had long assumed hierarchy and control now had to consider the possibility of equal or even superior forces. Policies were reconsidered, previously accepted assumptions challenged, and long-held strategies revised. Some delegates quietly admitted that humanity had done something unprecedented. It had shifted the perception of power across the galaxy without initiating conflict. Humans themselves continued to reflect on their position. Across colonies, discussions about the future became more sophisticated. Citizens debated the moral responsibilities of power, the importance of diplomacy, and the need for vigilance. Scientists explored new technologies, not only for defense, but for exploration and progress. Leaders emphasized unity, reminding everyone that strength came not only from technology or strategy, but from cohesion, foresight, and resilience. Humanity had revealed its strength, but it also recognized the importance of using that strength wisely. As the galaxy adapted to this new reality, humans also focused on growth and innovation. Colonies accelerated scientific research, developing technologies that could further secure independence and expand influence. Space travel became more efficient, communication systems more secure, and defense networks more sophisticated. Humanity was no longer just surviving, it was evolving in real time, shaping its future while the galaxy watched, learned, and reacted. Even ordinary citizens felt the consequences. Families, workers, students, and explorers all understood that they were part of a historic moment. The galaxy's view of humanity had changed, and with it came both opportunity and responsibility. People took pride in their contributions, whether in science, strategy, communication, or simply supporting communities during tense times. Every action reinforced the notion that humans were capable of extraordinary achievements when united and determined. Among other species, rumors and discussions spread quickly. Stories circulated about the precision, foresight, and strategic brilliance of humans. Some envoys and leaders began to quietly admire the species, noting that they had accomplished what no one else could, forcing recognition without conflict. Others, still wary, considered the potential dangers of underestimating humans again. In every case, humanity had forced a recalibration of assumptions, alliances, and expectations. Some species took direct action, carefully testing boundaries with humans through diplomatic or trade overtures. Others watched from a distance, curious and cautious. Every move required careful consideration, because one misstep could provoke a response from humans that would demonstrate capabilities far beyond expectation. The galaxy was learning that humans were not impulsive or reckless. They were deliberate, intelligent, and prepared. Within the council, strategies began to evolve. Some members proposed a more cooperative approach, seeking dialogue rather than confrontation. Others remained hesitant, unable to adjust their assumptions quickly enough. Even the most powerful fleets and military resources were reconsidered, as the evidence of human capability could no longer be ignored. The balance of power, long taken for granted, had shifted. Humans, observing all this, recognized that they had changed the narrative of the galaxy. They had shown that power was not just about weapons or numbers. It was about intelligence, strategy, unity, and timing. They had forced respect without aggression, earned recognition without fear, and established themselves as a species that would not be underestimated. Every action now for humans would be guided by both caution and foresight, ensuring that they maintained their position while continuing to grow and innovate. As the months passed, the galaxy slowly adapted to this new reality. Alliances were reassessed, trade routes reconsidered, and communication networks updated to reflect the new balance of power. Humans remained vigilant, aware that respect had been earned but not guaranteed. Their presence became a constant consideration for every species, reminding the galaxy that one well-prepared, intelligent species could alter centuries of assumptions in a single decisive act. Through all of this, humans did not act arrogantly or aggressively. They maintained calm, rational decision-making and a focus on progress, exploration, and defense. Their message had been clear. Humanity sought recognition, sovereignty, and respect, not domination. But the demonstration of capability and preparedness ensured that their position could not be ignored. The galaxy had been forced to adapt to humanity, not the other way around. In human space, the sense of accomplishment was strong, but tempered by responsibility. People understood that their actions had shifted the course of history. Every scientist, engineer, strategist, and ordinary citizen knew that humanity had achieved something remarkable. They had claimed recognition, ensured respect, and established independence, all without firing a single shot. They had changed the galaxy through intelligence, unity, and foresight, and the consequences would be felt for generations. Humanity had entered a new era, one in which their presence, decisions, and capabilities would shape alliances, influence, trade, and redefine diplomacy. They had proven that they were not just survivors, explorers, or inventors. They were a species capable of asserting power and earning respect in a complex galaxy. By the time the dust of the initial shock settled across the galaxy, humanity had entered a new era. The message they had sent, a refusal to pay tribute, combined with a display of unmatched strategic and technological capability, had forever changed the perception of their species. No longer were humans underestimated. No longer were they seen as weak or inconsequential. Across countless systems, species and civilizations began to recognize that humanity had earned its place among the galaxy's powerful and respected entities. Within human space, there was a sense of pride mixed with responsibility. Leaders, strategists, and citizens alike understood that their actions had consequences far beyond their own colonies. Every decision they made, every development they pursued, and every alliance they forged would now be observed closely by the rest of the galaxy. Humanity had stepped onto a larger stage, and with it came both opportunity and scrutiny. The Council, though still the formal authority, no longer operated with the same unquestioned confidence. Some of its members advocated for engagement, hoping to build diplomatic channels with humanity rather than provoke them. Others remained wary, fearing that any attempt to reassert dominance could provoke a species that had already demonstrated foresight, coordination, and technological brilliance. Meetings became longer, more careful, and filled with debate as the Council sought a way to maintain relevance without alienating a species that could no longer be ignored. Humans, for their part, moved cautiously but decisively. Across colonies, initiatives in science, technology, and defense accelerated. Energy networks were expanded and optimized, communication arrays improved, and fleet capabilities enhanced. Every system, every research station, every laboratory was tasked with advancing human capabilities in a way that would secure both survival and recognition. But progress was not driven by fear. It was driven by vision. Humans understood that true power was the combination of innovation, unity, and strategic foresight, not aggression or domination. Trade and diplomacy began to shift rapidly. Species that had once assumed they could control or manipulate human colonies now approached with caution and respect. Alliances were proposed, negotiations initiated, and contracts signed, but always with careful observation of humanity's response. Humans were no longer passive recipients of galactic policy. They were active participants shaping the interactions, negotiations, and agreements that would define the next era. Even in remote colonies, ordinary citizens felt the magnitude of what had occurred. Farmers, engineers, educators, and explorers all understood that they were living in a historic period. News broadcasts and reports highlighted every development, showing not just the achievements of scientists or military strategists, but the collective efforts of humanity as a whole. People celebrated quietly in homes, schools, and workplaces, recognizing that the actions of their species had altered the galaxy. It was a moment of shared accomplishment and shared responsibility. In the Council, factions began to emerge. Some sought collaboration, recognizing that humanity could be an ally and partner in endeavors across the stars. These delegates proposed treaties, joint ventures, and shared projects. Others remained skeptical, fearing that humanity's rapid rise in recognition and capability could challenge established hierarchies. Still, even the most cautious members had to acknowledge the undeniable fact. Humans were no longer a species that could be ordered or ignored. They had become a defining factor in galactic affairs. The shock of the earlier transmission had already started to influence other species' internal policies. Governments and leaders recalibrated their priorities, investing more in strategy, defense, and technology to match or anticipate human ingenuity. Military forces were reorganized, fleets expanded, and research intensified. Diplomats learned quickly that negotiation with humans required respect, preparation, and foresight. Humanity had shifted the rules, demonstrating that intellect and unity could achieve what centuries of fear and compliance could not dot at the same time. Humanity continued to cultivate its identity and values. Across the colonies, citizens were reminded that strength without purpose was hollow. Education emphasized innovation, cooperation, and responsibility. Communities worked together on projects that advanced not just survival, but exploration, understanding, and progress. Every achievement reinforced the idea that humans were a species capable of remarkable feats when united. Guided by intelligence and foresight, the galaxy began to recognize something profound. Humans had changed the game. They had not conquered or destroyed. They had not imposed fear or demanded submission. Instead, they had acted with confidence, intelligence, and unity. They had shown that power could come from strategy, preparation, and foresight. Every species that interacted with humans, whether through trade, diplomacy, or observation, began to understand that they were dealing with a species that would not be underestimated again. Diplomatic channels opened slowly as cautious leaders reached out to gauge human intentions. Humans responded with transparency, intelligence, and patience. They did not seek domination, but they also did not compromise their independence. Negotiations were guided by clarity and foresight, ensuring that agreements were mutually beneficial, while reinforcing humanity's newfound position in the galaxy. Humanity's rise inspired other species in subtle but meaningful ways. Some looked to humans as a model for strategic unity, innovation, and resilience. Others reconsidered their approaches to diplomacy, technology, and defense, realizing that the assumptions that had guided them for centuries were no longer sufficient. Humans had shown that intelligence, foresight, and collective effort could reshape not only the perception of a species, but the balance of power across the galaxy within human space. The era that followed the transmission became one of growth, collaboration, and cautious expansion. Colonies worked together on projects that advanced knowledge, technology, and exploration. Fleets patrolled not just for defense, but for learning, research, and interstellar cooperation. Citizens embraced their role as participants in a larger galaxy, understanding that every action contributed to the species' position and reputation. The Council, meanwhile, slowly adapted. Some delegates continued to resist, unwilling to fully acknowledge humanity's capabilities. Others accepted the new reality and sought partnerships. Policies and protocols were revised, long-held assumptions reconsidered, and strategies recalculated. Humans had forced a recalibration not through aggression, but through intelligence, unity, and foresight. The galaxy had been reshaped, and the consequences would be felt for generations. Humanity's message, once sent, became more than a refusal. It became a symbol. Across countless star systems, it was cited as an example of strategic courage, foresight, and capability. Scholars analyzed it, diplomats referenced it, and leaders considered it in every decision. Humans had not simply changed their own trajectory, they had changed the galaxy's perception of what a single species could achieve. And for humans themselves, the most remarkable outcome was understanding their own potential. Across generations, they realized that their unity, intelligence, and resilience were their greatest strengths. Technology, fleets, and strategy were tools, but it was the combination of foresight, collaboration, and determination that had shifted the galaxy. They had proven to themselves first, and then to countless other species, that humanity could not be underestimated. By the time centuries had passed, the galaxy had adjusted to humanity's presence and power. Humans had established themselves, not just as survivors or explorers, but as leaders in thought, strategy, and technological development. The species that had once been underestimated had become a defining force in the galaxy's politics, trade, and culture. Humanity had forged a path that combined strength with responsibility, innovation with ethics, and foresight with adaptability. And so, the new era was not defined by war, fear, or domination. It was defined by recognition, respect, and collaboration. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, not through violence, but through intelligence, unity, and the courage to act decisively when the moment demanded it. The Council and the galaxy had learned a lesson that would endure. Underestimating humans was no longer possible, and the presence of humanity would shape the future of countless civilizations for generations to come. In every colony, on every world, people continued to innovate, explore, and prepare for the challenges ahead. Citizens celebrated quietly, knowing they were part of a species that had changed the galaxy not with weapons, but with foresight, unity, and courage. They had shown that intelligence and collaboration could achieve what fear and submission never could. Humanity had arrived as equals, ready to influence the galaxy's future, and determined to ensure that their species would never again be overlooked. The legacy of that historic moment, the transmission, the defiance, and the display of capability would remain a touchstone for generations. Humans had proven that vision, strategy, and unity could shape the galaxy itself. They had secured respect, recognition, and independence. And in doing so, they had established a future where humanity was not just a species among many, but a force capable of inspiring, leading, and shaping the unfolding story of the stars.